48 hours. That's how long it took for Trump to respond to a speech that never mentioned his name. January 20th, Davos. Mark Carney stands on stage at the World Economic Forum and declares the rules-based international order is over. He talks about middle powers acting together. He references American hegemony. He never says Trump, not once. January 21st. Trump takes the same stage, points at where Carney sat the day before, and says this: Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. 24 hours after that, Carney responds from Quebec City. Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Those 3 moments tell you everything about where this relationship is now. One leader trying to assert dominance by demanding gratitude, another leader refusing to perform it, and the gap between those positions getting wider every single day. I'm going to walk you through what actually happened in those 48 hours. What Carney said that triggered Trump so completely. How Trump's response revealed exactly what he thinks this relationship is supposed to be. Why Carney's refusal to back down matters strategically, not just symbolically. And what happens next when neither side is willing to blink. Because what you're watching isn't a diplomatic spat. It's the end of an assumption that defined North American relations for 70 years. Start with Carney's speech. January 20th, World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland. Every major political and business leader on the planet is in that room. Carney walks on stage and gives what Time magazine later called one of the most important speeches at Davos in years. He opens by quoting Václav Havel, the Czech dissident who became president after the fall of communism. Havel wrote about how power sustains itself not through force, but through collective performance. Everyone puts up signs they don't believe. Everyone participates in the fiction, and the system survives because no one breaks the illusion, until one person does. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down. Then Carney says this: we are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition, a rupture. The old rules-based order isn't fading. It's over, done. And what's replacing it is a world where great powers use economic integration as weapons, where countries get coerced not through military force but through trade dependency, where being integrated into American markets means being vulnerable to American political pressure. He never says Trump's name, but everyone knows what he's talking about. Canadians know that our old, comfortable assumption that our geography and alliance memberships automatically conferred prosperity and security is no longer valid. Translation: we can't assume America will protect us just because we're neighbors and allies. Not anymore. Then comes the line that got quoted everywhere. Middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. The room gives him a standing ovation. Trump is watching from the United States. And here's what matters. Carney leaves Davos that same day, flies home, doesn't stay for Trump's speech, doesn't wait around, makes his point and exits. Trump arrives in Davos on January 21st, takes the stage, spends 70 minutes talking about Greenland, Venezuela, missile defense systems, stock markets, and then, in the middle of demanding Denmark hand over Greenland for a Golden Dome missile shield, Trump pivots to Canada. We're building a Golden Dome that's going to, just by its very nature, be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful, but they should be grateful to us, Canada. Canada lives because of the United States. Then he looks at where Carney had been sitting the day before and says, remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. Here's what's revealing about that moment. Trump didn't rebut Carney's argument. He didn't address the points about coercion or weaponized trade or the need for middle powers to coordinate. He demanded gratitude. He asserted that Canada owes its existence to American protection, and he warned Carney to remember that before speaking again. That's not a diplomatic response. That's a power move. Trump's message wasn't, you're wrong about the international order. It was, you owe us, and you need to act like it. And the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, went on Bloomberg TV and said, give me a break. They have the second best deal in the world, and all I got to do is listen to this guy whine and complain. Second best deal, meaning you're lucky we let you have access to our markets. Stop complaining. Wait, here's where Carney's response becomes strategic, not just emotional. January 22nd, Quebec City. Carney is back in Canada for a cabinet retreat. He gives a nearly 30-minute speech, and instead of getting defensive, instead of arguing about who saved whom, he reframes the entire conversation. Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Then he lays out what that means. Canada is diverse. That's a strength, not a weakness. Canada is inclusive. You don't need to be rich, have a certain skin color, or worship a certain god to succeed here. Canada can show the world that democracy doesn't have to be authoritarian, that progress is still possible. And then he says this, we are masters in our home. This is our own country. It's our future. The choice is up to us. And that's not a defense. That's a declaration of independence. Carney isn't arguing that America didn't help defend Canada historically. He's saying that history doesn't give America control over Canada's future decisions. Gratitude for past protection doesn't mean submission to future demands. And he doesn't stop there. He confirms what he told Trump in their private phone call. Canada signed 12 new trade deals in 6 months. 4 continents, the EU Defense Partnership, the China Agricultural Agreement, all designed to reduce dependence on American markets. And when Trump complained about it, Carney said Trump was impressed. That's not backing down. That's doubling down while reframing the conversation entirely. Trump wanted deference. Carney gave him a list of alternatives. Here's why that matters strategically. Because Trump's entire approach to Canada depends on one assumption. Canada needs us more than we need them. And if that assumption is true, then demanding gratitude works. Threatening tariffs works. Mocking Canadian sovereignty works. Because at the end of the day, Canada has to come back to the table and accept whatever terms America offers. But if that assumption is wrong, if Canada actually has built alternatives, if the 12 trade deals are real and the EU partnership is real and the diversification is happening, then demanding gratitude doesn't work. It accelerates the divorce. And Carney is betting that Trump either doesn't realize the assumption is wrong or can't adjust his strategy even if he does. Here's the evidence that Carney might be right. Trump's response to Carney's speech was to withdraw Canada's invitation to join the Board of Peace, the Gaza reconstruction body that charges $1 billion for a seat. Trump announced it on Truth Social. Please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you. Carney had already questioned whether Canada would join. He'd said publicly that humanitarian aid wasn't flowing to Gaza yet, and that needs to be fixed first. So Trump's withdrawal of an invitation Carney wasn't accepting anyway is theater. It's performative punishment that doesn't actually cost Canada anything. But here's what it reveals. Trump thinks taking away access is leverage, invitations, trade deals, defense cooperation. He assumes Canada wants these things enough that threatening to revoke them will force compliance. And when that doesn't work, when Carney shrugs and keeps signing deals with other countries, Trump doesn't have a plan B, because demanding deference from a position of dependence works. Demanding deference from someone who's built alternatives doesn't. And every time Trump demands it anyway, he proves Carney's point that the relationship isn't reliable. Now here's where the domestic politics matter, because Carney isn't just managing Trump, he's managing Canadian voters. And Trump's behavior is making Carney more popular. A poll taken right after Davos showed Carney's approval ratings climbing. His speech got praised not just in Canada, but internationally. California Governor Gavin Newsom said multiple American leaders sent him transcripts of Carney's speech. I respect what Carney did because he had courage of convictions. He stood up, and I think we need to stand up in America and call this out with clarity. Even conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, who's been criticizing Carney on other issues, called the Davos speech eloquently delivered. He said if liberal words and good intentions were tradable commodities, Canada would already be the richest nation on earth. That's not praise for the policy, but it's acknowledgement that the speech itself resonated. Trump's Canada lives because of the United States line had the opposite effect. It unified Canadians across the political spectrum in rejecting the premise. You can criticize Carney's policies, you can argue about trade strategy, but the idea that Canada owes its existence to American protection and should therefore defer to American demands, that doesn't fly. Not with liberals, not with conservatives, not with anyone. So Trump's pressure campaign is backfiring domestically. It's making it harder for Canadian politicians to cooperate with American demands because being seen as submissive to Trump is now politically toxic. Here's what happens when neither side backs down. The CUSMA review happens in July, 4 months away. Trump's team will demand changes, dairy access, digital services tax elimination, procurement rules, and they'll have tariffs as leverage. Canada is still absorbing 35% tariffs on steel, 45% on lumber, 25% on autos in some categories. Carney will walk into that review with a position that's been publicly stated. Canada is diversifying, has alternatives, and won't negotiate from a position of assumed dependence. That doesn't mean Canada won't make deals, but it means Canada won't make deals out of fear. And here's the tension. Trump's leverage is real but declining. The tariffs hurt, but Canada's economy is adjusting. The EU partnership opens new markets. The 12 trade deals reduce U.S. exposure. Every month that passes, American leverage gets a little weaker, which means if Trump wants maximum leverage, he needs to use it now. But using it now, escalating pressure, drives Canada further toward alternatives faster. That's the bind Trump is in, and Carney knows it. There's also the political calendar. November 2026, U.S. midterm elections. Trump's approval on cost of living is 30%. His tariffs cost the average American household $1,300 annually. The House already voted 219-211 to terminate Canada tariffs. 6 Republicans crossed over despite Trump's threats. If the midterms go badly for Trump, his leverage collapses entirely. Carney can afford to wait. Trump might not be able to. Now, here's where I need to be honest about what this doesn't change. Canada and the U.S. still operate NORAD together. That's not optional. Arctic security requires coordination. The geography doesn't change just because the political relationship is tense. Canadian defense is tied to American defense in ways that trade deals with Europe don't eliminate. And the majority of Canadian trade still goes to the United States. 67% of exports. That's down from 75%, which is significant, but it's still the majority, by a lot. So when Trump says Canada depends on American markets, he's not entirely wrong. The question is whether that dependence is so complete that Canada has no leverage at all. Carney is betting it's not. Trump is betting it is. And the CUSMA review will test who's right. But here's what's already changed irreversibly. The assumption that Canada will always defer to American demands because it has no choice is dead. Maybe Canada still makes concessions in July. Maybe the tariffs are too painful and the alternatives aren't ready yet. But even if Canada blinks in July, the fact that alternatives exist now means the next time this fight happens, Canada's position is stronger. Trump can win this round. But he's losing the long game, because every time he demands gratitude, every time he threatens Canada's sovereignty, every time he uses economic coercion as a negotiating tactic, he proves Carney's point. The relationship isn't reliable. The old order is over. Middle powers need alternatives, and Carney is building them. I want to know what you think. Is Carney right to refuse to back down even though Canada still depends heavily on U.S. markets? Or is this a dangerous gamble that risks real economic damage for symbolic independence? And if you're American, does Trump's "Canada lives because of us" line strike you as reasonable assertion of power or counterproductive bullying? Let me know.